Friends, hello to all. Today we continue the topic of the Crusades and how Muslims treated the Crusaders. In this video, I will tell you about the quality of Europeans because of which Muslim authors respected and admired them, even despite all the curses that were heaped on the Crusaders. In general, we can talk for a long time about Muslim ideas about Europe before the Crusades. But if in short, the majority of the Muslim world knew almost nothing about Europe. Yes, in principle, they were not particularly interested in these lands. Yes, the works of Ptolemy were translated. They knew something about Christianity from representatives of Christian communities in the Middle East, merchants and diplomats. But it cannot be said that the Muslim world simply could not live without news from Europe. Even before the Crusades, a certain stereotypical image of Europeans was formed, and with the beginning of the first campaign, this image was fixed. In the Muslim mind, the Crusaders were uncouth barbarians, rude, dirty, and smelly animals who, in addition to everything, lacked a sense of jealousy. But against the background of all these negative traits, Muslims singled out the incredible bravery and courage of the inhabitants of Europe. People wrote about bravery before the Crusades, and after meeting the Crusaders in person, Muslims were finally convinced of this. Even Osama ibn Munkid, the author of that very joke about Europeans in Hammam, the link to which you will find at the end of the video, cannot help but note the bravery of the Franks. The Franks, may God make them helpless, do not possess any virtues inherent in people except bravery, do not consider any superiority or high position except knighthood. And no one means anything to them except knights. Ibn Shaddad writes this about the Franks. Look at the endurance and fearlessness of these people in difficult circumstances. Even Nuruddin himself is credited with the following statement: I fought only with the bravest people, the Franks. Also, the Christians' religious fervor inspired great respect and recognition among Muslims. Imad ad-Din cited this quality as an example. He presented the Franks' zeal for their faith as a model for the weakening fighting spirit of the Muslims. He praises the Christians for achieving their goals, showing courage and spending their wealth on the needs of the faith. Muslim authors also note the courage of the Crusader leaders, such as Richard the Lionheart. In his story, Ibn al-Athir writes the following: he was an outstanding man of his time in terms of courage, cunning, steadfastness, and patience. Because of him, the Muslims had to endure a cruel trial of unprecedented disasters. Muslims also admired the behavior of the French king Saint Louis in captivity, since he stayed with his people, although he could have avoided this captivity. This is how Saad ad-Din describes him. If the Frenchman wanted to escape, he could have done so, but he preferred. A particularly interesting description is that of Conrad of Montferrat, whom the Muslims hated very much. Perhaps only René de Chatillon was subjected to more insults. But even with all these curses, the authors did not forget to pay tribute to Conrad's bravery. Ibn al-Athir writes very reservedly about Conrad's achievements in uniting the Franks against Saladin. He ruled well enough and went to extremes in fortifying the city of Tyre. He was a devil in human form, but he was knowledgeable in governance and defense and possessed great courage. But Ibn Shaddad did not mince words when describing the Crusader. Conrad was the most fearless and the most powerful of the Franks in battle, and also the most artificial in governance. He was one of the greatest tempters of unbelief, his most seductive devil, his most rapacious wolf, his most vicious jackal, his most unclean dog. He was the true embodiment of a treacherous tyrant. For him and his kind, hell was created. Thus, when reading Muslim sources, one can see the following. Yes, Christians were hated, considered fools, ignorant, and worms. But no matter how hard they tried to humiliate them and present them in an unfavorable light, it was impossible not to notice the bravery of the Crusaders. It was for their bravery and courage that the warriors of Christ earned respect among Muslim authors.